got an 8 in listening and reading, but 6.5 in writing. This is the exact profile of so many of our course students. I've worked with over 30,000 of them, and I've seen this again and again. Strong students losing marks for reasons that have little to do with their English. And once they fix those mistakes, their score goes up to a 7 or even 7.5. And in this video, I want to show you what's really happening, the 5 areas you should pay your attention to, and why you may be closer to band 7 than you think. But first, let's talk about one tool that reveals the real problem. It's been available to IELTS students for a while now, but honestly, most people still don't use it. It's called the IELTS score breakdown. When you get your IELTS score online, there is just one writing score. And it can feel quite frustrating because it really doesn't tell you what happened. The breakdown gives you a much clearer picture. It shows how the examiner assessed each of the core criteria across Task 1 and Task 2, so you can finally see where things went well and where they didn't. If you've already taken your IELTS, I'll leave instructions in the video descriptions so you can see how to apply. Over time, these results have become such a valuable source of insight for us. I do work with former IELTS examiners directly, but these breakdowns help us spot patterns almost in real time. So let's look at a few of those patterns next, because they can make a real difference to your writing score. Let's start with something many students don't pay enough attention to. Everyone knows there are 2 tasks. Task 1 is shorter and counts for 1/3 of the score. Task 2 is longer, takes more time, and counts for 2/3. So naturally, most students focus more time on Task 2 when they prepare. But have a look at this score breakdown. You see, it was Task 1 that reduced the scores below 7. Task 2, the essay, was fine. And ironically, this score breakdown was received by our student who didn't even enroll in Task 1. They only bought the Task 2 course because they were sure the essay was the problem. And this is a pattern I keep on seeing. So many students actually receive lower marks in Task 1. And this happens in both IELTS Academic, where you need to describe a chart, maps, or diagrams, and in general training, where you need to write a letter. So even though Task 1 carries less weight on paper, it still deserves as much care and attention during preparation. Now, there is another big problem that affects a lot of IELTS students. We've known about it for a long time, long before IELTS score breakdowns became available, but they just confirm it. Let me tell you about another student of mine. She was sure her vocabulary was holding her back, and she was memorizing word lists before her retake. But when she received her breakdown, her lexical resource was already at a band 7, and so was her grammar. The lower scores were in task response, how well you respond to the task and answer the question, and coherence and cohesion, the structure and flow of your answers. In other words, her English was strong enough, but her essay writing skills were the weak part. And these are the patterns my whole writing courses are built around, and that's why they allow so many students to improve their score in a short period of time. We wouldn't be able to help them meaningfully improve their English skills in a matter of weeks or a couple of months, but we can help them write better answers. If you'd like to check out the courses, I'll link them below. And now there are a few mistakes in particular I'd like to draw your attention to. There is something slightly uncomfortable I need to say here. Sometimes the way IELTS writing is taught online makes the problem worse. I'm sure you've seen and perhaps watched videos about impressive vocabulary for a band 9 or some templates that are guaranteed to get a certain score. And students start believing that writing is about sounding sophisticated. But when you actually read the band descriptors, you see that's not true. And last year, I decided to take the IELTS exam myself for one very specific reason. I wanted to prove that simple, clear writing can achieve a very high score. So I wrote a deliberately simple essay, straightforward vocabulary, uncomplicated grammar, classic essay structure, and the result, band 8.5. What I found most interesting was the breakdown behind the score. So task response and coherence and cohesion, in other words, the essay writing skills, that's where I received the top bands. And those are exactly the areas where many students struggle the most. For grammar and vocabulary, I received band 8, which makes sense. Slightly more advanced level would have probably pushed those scores even higher. But I wanted to prove my point about simplicity. And here is the thing. An 8.5 is enough for you to pass your test, right? So the best strategy is to keep your writing simple and clear and focus on the 5 things we're gonna cover next. And these work for both academic and general training students. First of all, to get a high score, the essay has to answer the question. I'm sure it sounds obvious. And yet, when we look at band 6 or 6.5 essays, a lot of them drift slightly off topic. What often happens is this. Students read the question quickly, recognize the general theme, think about their ideas just a little bit and quickly start writing. But the exam doesn't reward writing in general. It only rewards responding very precisely to what the question's asking. And I understand why it's difficult. Some questions are not as straightforward as they may seem. So let's look at one example. The topic is, today many people work until a later age. Do the advantages of this outweigh the disadvantages? Give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. Write at least 250 words. So imagine deciding there are far more advantages. And a common instinct is to write mostly about those advantages and then briefly mention a few disadvantages somewhere. But in a question that asks you to compare both sides, that approach would weaken your task response. And even if the advantages are far greater, in your opinion, both sides still need to be covered in your essay. And that often means a balanced structure. An introduction, one body paragraph about the advantages, the second about the disadvantages, and then a clear conclusion. And there is one more important detail. It's not enough to just describe both sides. The essay also needs to make your opinion completely clear. Which side is stronger? And this brings us to the next point. There are 2 very common problems with opinions in band 6 or 6.5 essays. Both of them have nothing to do with vocabulary or grammar. So the first problem is that the opinion is too vague. Students often write introductions like, while there are valid arguments on both sides, I believe this is a complex issue. But the examiner is left wondering, what is the opinion? And many writers try to sound balanced because they either don't want to sound too strong, or they think they should explore all the arguments before saying what their opinion is. But this is not a piece of academic research. IELTS rewards clarity. So the best way is really to say what you think, what your opinion is in the introduction, then maintain it throughout the essay and reconfirm in the conclusion. And here I'll show you a simple example of how a clear opinion could look like in our essay. Although working until a later age can create certain challenges, I believe the advantages are far greater than any potential drawbacks. That's it. The second problem with opinions is inconsistency. The essay begins with one opinion and then slowly drifts. So the introduction sounds like, yeah, the advantages are far greater. Then the first body paragraph supports that idea. And then the second body paragraph suddenly presents a very strong argument for the opposite side, like a very strong disadvantage, without really explaining the overall stance. And by the conclusion, the opinion becomes unclear. And from the examiner's perspective, this feels confusing. Your position should be visible in 3 places: the introduction, the body paragraphs, through the way arguments are presented, and the conclusion, not repeated word by word, but clearly aligned. One of the things I hear most often from students is, I just don't have ideas. But when I actually sit down and read their essays, the ideas are usually there. Not just there, they're often good, like sensible, logical, more than enough to pass. The problem is how those ideas are presented, and I often see one of these problems. So, very often students introduce an idea and then leave it too quickly. So they move on to the next point before the first one has really been explored. Or they do the opposite. They stay with the same idea, repeating it in slightly different words, instead of supporting it, exploring it, developing it. And both of those patterns reduce the score. The examiner is looking for well-developed ideas. So let's look at what that actually means in practice. We'll take a paragraph on the advantages of working longer. Now, this is exactly the kind of paragraph that easily turns into a list. Firstly, secondly, moreover, in addition. There is nothing wrong with these words, but when they're used mechanically, like at the beginning of each sentence, the paragraph reads like a checklist or just like a list. So instead, we're gonna look at how those ideas can be developed and linked together. First of all, the paragraph should have a clear focus, and it should be obvious what's it about from the very beginning. Ours is about the benefits of longer working lives. So we're right. Longer working lives can bring important benefits for both individuals and society. That's the topic of our paragraph. Then we introduce the first idea. Older workers stay active and financially secure. And we don't stop here. We explain the consequences, like remaining physically and mentally active, or earning income and reducing reliance on others. Only after that, we present the second idea, experience shared with younger colleagues. That's valuable. And again, it's expanded. It's supporting teamwork, it's ensuring continuity, and then the paragraph widens slightly to a broader level, and we're talking about falling birth rates and labor shortages. And finally, we use a very concrete example from Japan. And the example directly supports the argument. If you'd like to read the paragraph, pause the video now. So what makes this paragraph strong? Well, each idea is explained. There is logical progression. The example reinforces the main argument rather than introducing a new topic. And this kind of development is only possible when you plan. So even 3 or 5 minutes before writing your essay makes a real difference. Many students have heard that they need a good structure in their essay, and their essay should flow, or the ideas should be connected. Indeed, that's true. That's what you need for a high coherence and cohesion score. But many students mistakenly think that linking words is what they need to achieve all this. So they try to add more of them and sometimes start every sentence with firstly, moreover, therefore, furthermore. But Cohesion is not just about adding connectors everywhere. It's about how naturally your ideas move one to the next. So let's look at our paragraph again. What makes it flow? Well, first of all, logical progression. Even without many linkers, the reader can follow the argument easily because good cohesion starts with good logic. Next, linking words. Notice they're only used where needed. There are actually very few formal connectors. We have in addition to introduce another advantage and, for example, to give an example. And that's enough. We don't have this mechanical firstly, secondly, thirdly, because the structure is already clear. And the next thing I want to draw your attention to is pronouns and references. It's so overlooked. Look at phrases like these advantages, their continued participation. So we're developing the idea we started in the previous sentence. And instead of repeating full phrases, the paragraph uses references. This avoids repetition and creates smooth flow. And these small words, this, these, it, they improve cohesion. So the key idea is simple. If your arguments are logical, you won't need to force linking words into your writing. What we've been discussing today will help you improve the first two criteria: task achievement or task response and coherence and cohesion. But 50% of your score depends on your vocabulary or lexical resource and grammar, grammatical range and accuracy. And even though it's hard to meaningfully improve those skills in a short period of time, you can improve the way you present those skills to the examiner. So let's talk about one very common and costly myth about IELTS writing. Some videos spread very quickly online. We've touched on it earlier in the video. These are things like advanced vocabulary for band 9 or 40 complex words you must learn and use. And I understand why they're so popular. They feel like a shortcut. You learn those words, you add them to your essay, and you improve your score. But complex language does not automatically increase your score. Quite often, it does the opposite. Let me explain. When students try to use vocabulary above their level, small inaccuracies start to appear, and examiners reduce the score if there are too many mistakes. So instead of moving from 6.5 to 7, the score may actually drop. The safer strategy is this. Use the language that is natural for you, not primitive, but precise and controlled. And if you know what you're supposed to write about in each paragraph, how to fully answer the question, whatever type of task you get, you'll be able to write better essays faster and actually finish within your time limit. So let me show you how to write a perfect introduction to your essay using my 3-step formula. It's in this video, and this is a course preview video, so if you enjoy the style and find it helpful, I'll be delighted to see you in my courses too. And thank you so much for watching me today. Good luck with your preparation and your exam.